already. So this is chapter 4 on tissues. And again, hopefully some of this is a review of what we've been over in lab because you guys have already studied tissues a little bit. Tissues is just a group of cells that have similar structure and function, and we call histology the study of tissues. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? On the same page? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Okay. So these are the 4 types of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. Epithelial tissues are the covering or lining tissues. Connective tissues are the most diverse. That includes your blood, your cartilage, your bone, muscle tissue, which will contract or shorten, and then your nervous tissue. And again, I hope this is a review. Epithelial tissue will be the tissue that covers surfaces, protecting both outside and inside of the body. We also include glands in epithelial tissue, so your exocrine and endocrine glands. Here are characteristics of epithelial tissue. It's composed of all cells, so not a lot of extra stuff is in epithelial tissue. It's mainly all cells. It covers body surfaces. There are distinct cell surfaces. There are cell and matrix connections, meaning your cells are connected together. What does non-vascular mean?
No blood flow.
No blood, yeah.
Good, no blood vessels. So no blood goes through this, no blood vessels, and it's capable of regenerating, meaning the cells can reproduce and form more cells. So here are characteristics of epithelial tissue or epithelium. You can see mainly all cells. There's not a lot of extra collagen fibers or elastic fibers. It's just all cells. And you can see here there's usually an exposed or free surface, and then there's a basement membrane that attaches to the basal surface of those cells. You will see capillaries below the layer of epithelial tissue, but the blood capillaries themselves won't go into the epithelial tissue. Functions, your epithelial tissue, because it covers things like your skin or your organs, it will protect them, whatever lies beneath. It will also act as a barrier like your skin. It will permit the passage of substances, so meaning some things will get through it, others won't. It will also secrete substances because glands are involved in those, and it will help absorb things, especially in your intestines. You have epithelial tissue that will absorb all of your glucose or digested materials that get through the intestine. Epithelials are classified by how many layers of cells they have and the shape of their superficial cells on the exposed surface. So you guys know by now the cell layers can be simple stratified or pseudostratified, and the shapes of the cells can be squamous, cuboidal, columnar, or we call transitional shape that is able to be stretched. So simple epithelium is 1 layer of cells. Stratified is more than 1 layer. Pseudostratified is a special type of simple epithelium that appears to be falsely stratified. So that means there will be 1 layer of cells, but it looks like there are different layers due to the shape of the cells. Then we classify epithelial by their shape of their cells. The squamous cells are flat, irregular, they kind of look like fried eggs. Cuboidal cells are cube-shaped, and columnar cells are more rectangular shaped. Simple squamous then is a single layer of thin flat cells. So because it's a single really thin layer, substances can easily pass through it, like in the lungs and in the kidneys. So your lungs, carbon dioxide and oxygen will pass through the simple squamous epithelium surrounding your air sacs. And in your kidneys, simple squamous epithelium will help filter wastes from your blood. So here's a look at simple squamous, 1 layer of flat-like cells. And then this is located in what we call the glomerulus of your kidney, which is the big filtering area where things will filter out of your blood. Okay, simple cuboidal is 1 layer of cube-shaped cells. They will be important for facilitated diffusion, secretion. They have a greater secretory capacity, so they're able, you'll often find these in glands. as well as in the kidney. So here's a single layer of cuboidal shaped cells shown in the kidney for absorption, reabsorbing things back into the blood, or secretion, secreting things back into the urine, the filtrate that's being formed in the kidney. You can see a single layer of cube-shaped cells here, and the nucleus is usually right in the dead center of those cells. And this kind of free white area in the middle is called the lumen, and the lumen is just the area where the filtrate or urine will flow down the tubules. What else? The free surface of the cells will be the surface it's exposed, and the basement membrane will be attached to the bottom part of those cells. Simple columnar is a single layer of column-shaped cells. You'll find these in your intestines because they secrete mucus and other digestive enzymes. So these are simple columnar cells. They're really tall. The nucleus is usually at the bottom and more oval-shaped. You'll see other goblet cells which will contain mucus that will be secreted, and we'll find this type of epithelium in your intestines. Pseudostratified columnar, again, it's a type of simple epithelium. So it looks like it's fake stratified. Secretes mucus, which will cover its free surface. And it also has cilia, which are little tiny hairs attached to the exposed surface. And this pseudostratified columnar epithelium will often be found in your respiratory tract, so lining your trachea, parts of your lungs, your nasal cavity. The mucus will help trap anything harmful you breathe in, and then the cilia will move that mucus and harmful substances out of the respiratory tract when you cough. And I think I went on a soapbox sermon about how you shouldn't smoke because smoking completely changes this epithelium, and it changes pseudostratified ciliated in your trachea just to a squamous, a really thin layer of epithelium. So you're not able to cough up or get rid of anything harmful you breathe in anymore. So that's why smokers usually cough a lot more. They don't have mucus to trap those harmful substances, so they compensate for that by coughing up anything harmful they breathe. Breathing in smoke probably does that from forest fires. I've been wondering how these fires and all this smoke and ash is probably going to affect us. Hopefully not bad, especially kids and elderly. Okay, then get into the stratified squamous layers. Types of epithelium. Stratified just means more than one layer, so several layers thick. So these will be several layers of squamous shaped cells. The deepest cell layers might be cuboidal, but again, all of epithelium are named for the shape of their cells at the exposed surface. There's two types of stratified squamous: keratinized or non-keratinized. Keratinized is when the outer layer is comprised of a keratin layer, and keratin fills up those outer layer cells. It's a protein that helps to reduce water loss in the body. And then non-keratinized, meaning the outermost layer will still be alive. They'll be moist. They won't be filled with keratin, so they're alive. And that this just helps to provide extra protection in areas of abrasion, like the oral cavity, your esophagus where food is going down, your anal canal where wastes are being excreted. Water can still move across it more readily. So this is a look at the stratified squamous. And this is non-keratinized because you can see that there's still little dots in the exposed cells, and those dots are the nuclei. And if a cell has a nucleus, that means it's alive. So this non-keratinized stratified squamous will be found in areas like your oral cavity, your esophagus. Stratified cuboidal, multiple layers of cube-shaped cells. You'll find this in your sweat glands, your salivary glands. They help in absorption, secretion, and protection. Stratified columnar then is multiple layers of column-shaped cells. They help also in secretion, protection, and absorption. We'll find them in male urethras. No problem, Ted. Thanks for your that. The mammary gland ducts, parts of your larynx. Your larynx is your voice box right above your trachea. And then transitional epithelium. Again, transitional epithelium is a special type of stratified, and transitional epithelium can be stretched. So it can stretch out and then recoil to regain its shape. So an area of a lot of stretching in the body are parts of your urinary tract, your bladder, other parts of the bladder, the ureter and urethra, which can stretch to hold the urine that's passing through or being stored in it. So I sometimes often think transitional epithelium looks like balloons, or I think of it like a balloon because it can stretch, get really thin, and then come back together, recoil to its original shape. Any questions on that so far? I know that's kind of fast, but I'm hoping some of that's a review from what we did in lab.
Can you explain the stratified columnar again, please?
Yes. So stratified, columnar. Stratified means multiple layers. Columnar are column-shaped cells. So more than one layer of column-shaped cells. The surface cells will be column-shaped, but again, the epithelium is always named for what its surface cells look like, even though the deeper cells might be more irregular or cuboidal in shape. Stratified columnar epithelium is very relatively rare. So I always remember it. It's in your mammary gland ducts for females, parts of the larynx, and also in the male urethra. And it helps to carry out secretion, protection, and absorption functions. So one of the more rare types of epithelium. Does that help? Okay. Free cell surfaces, most epithelia have a free surface. Oh yeah, no problem. Have a free surface that's not in contact with any other cells and faces away from underlying tissue. So the free cell surface would be the cell surface that is attached or that's in contact with food that's going down your esophagus or in your trachea. It's the part that's in contact with anything harmful you might breathe in, or the mucus. It'll be the stratified squamous on the exterior part of your skin. The characteristics of the free surface reflect its functions. So the free surface will be smooth or lined with microvilli, which are little tiny kind of out pockets in the intestine, or cilia, which are little tiny hairs that move materials on the top of the cell. Cell connections, cells can be held together. So again, we're still talking about epithelium, which is made of mostly of cells. Cells can be connected to one another. These structures, these cell connections will mechanically bind your cells together. They'll help form a permeability barrier, so it'll still allow some things to get through and provide a mechanism for your cells to be connected to communicate with each other. Desmosomes are mechanical links that bind cells together. Hemidesmosomes are half desmosomes that will anchor cells to the basement membrane, which again is the connection that will anchor all these cells to the tissue that is below it. Tight junctions prevent the passage of materials between epithelial cells. Similar to like a belt surrounds the waist. Materials can pass through this epithelial layer, but they must pass through the cells first. So tight junctions will help regulate materials crossing epithelium. And we'll find them in the intestines. Gap junctions will be channels. So gap junctions will be some sort of channel that allows molecules and ions to pass from one cell to the next. Researchers believe that molecules or ions that move through the gap junctions will act as some sort of communication signal to coordinate the activities of all the cells. So a gap junction is like a channel that allows certain things to pass through between the cells. So here's a look at different cell connections. Here's a desmosome. A hemidesmosome anchors the cell to the basement membrane. A gap junction, you'll see different channels or openings where things can go between cells. A tight junction was like a belt. It completely keeps them tightly together. So those are just different types of cell connections, how these epithelial cells are connected together. Glands will secrete substances onto a surface, into a cavity, or into the bloodstream. They can be either exocrine or endocrine glands. Exocrine glands have a duct, and a duct is just a tube that carries whatever the gland secretes into an area. So an exocrine gland has a duct, and endocrine glands do not have ducts. So endocrine glands will secrete their products, most often their hormones, directly into the bloodstream, whereas an exocrine gland will have a duct. So this would be like a sweat gland. A salivary gland has a duct that takes saliva into your mouth. Sweat glands take sweat out to the exterior surface of your skin, but an endocrine gland does not have a duct. They just put their hormones right into your bloodstream. Most exocrine glands are multicellular, meaning they have different types of cells. Some exocrine glands have a single cell, like a goblet cell, which secretes mucus. Simple glands have a single non-branched duct. I want to show you a picture. Good, we'll eventually get to a picture. A compound exocrine gland has multiple branched ducts, and glands with a secretory region shaped as tubules are called tubular, whereas those shaped in a sac-like structure are called acinar or alveolar. And I'll show you a picture of that. Tubular glands will be a straight or coiled together, and then glands with a combination of the two will be a tubular acinar or tubulo-alveolar. And let's show a picture of kind of what I'm talking about here. Here's a simple tubular gland in the stomach and colon, just a secretory portion where it'll secrete whatever it's making, and a duct that it'll flow through. And this is a compound tubular gland where there's different secretory portions. I don't think there's many detailed questions about types of glands on your lecture exam, but you should know the difference between an exocrine gland that has a duct, like shown here, these different pictures, and an endocrine gland which do not have ducts. Exocrine glands can also be classified according to how products leave the cell. So they can be merocrine, apocrine, or holocrine. You might want to know these three different types. Merocrine secretion involves the release of a secretory product by exocytosis. Apocrine secretion involves the release of its product as pinched off fragments of the gland cells themselves. And holocrine secretion involves the shedding of the entire cell. So again, these are different classifications of exocrine glands, and they're classified according to how their product will actually leave the cell. So here's a merocrine gland releasing a product via exocytosis. So we'll see little vesicles releasing its contents into the duct. In apocrine gland, secretory products are stored in the cell, and then they'll be pinched off as little pieces. And then holocrine glands, entire cells of a dying cell will be released, and then that dying cell will release its secretory products. The lab test is today, the lecture is on Thursday. Connective tissue, so that's epithelial tissue. Connective tissue is the most diverse. Remember, we're talking about blood, cartilage, bone. So connective tissue will have a lot of extracellular matrix. So instead of being made up of a lot of cells like epithelial was, connective tissue is very diverse. It has a lot of extracellular matrix, which could include ground substance, fibers. It's very diverse in structure and function, and it's comprised of cells, protein fibers, collagen, elastic, and extracellular matrix. So here are functions of connective tissue. They will enclose and separate other tissues. They will connect one tissue to another. They support and move parts of your body, like your bone, store compounds, bone stores compounds. They help to cushion and insulate the body. Adipose, your fat, is a type of connective tissue. They help to transport things because blood is a type of connective tissue, and they will help in protection. So different types of cells in connective tissue. The name of the cell identifies the cell functions. Osteoblasts, osteo has to do with bone. So osteoblasts will form bone, will build bone. Osteocytes maintain it, and osteoclasts break bone down. Fibroblasts are cells that form fibrous connective tissue, and fibrocytes maintain it. Chondroblasts form cartilage, and chondrocytes maintain it. So if a word ends in cyte, like osteocyte, fibrocyte, chondrocyte. Those will maintain the tissue that they're in. A blast word will build or form a cell that they're in. And osteoclasts will break bone down specifically. So blasts will build, clasts will kill, break it down, and a site word is just a mature or maintenance word. Hopefully that'll make sense. I don't know, that helped me learn them. Other connective tissue cells, macrophages are large cells capable of moving about, ingesting foreign substances, so they're kind of involved in the immune response. Mast cells are non-motile, so they do not move. They release histamine, which helps promote inflammation. If anything foreign does make it into the tissues, it'll help to fight it off and start an inflammation response. Extracellular matrix. So when we talk about the ECM or extracellular matrix, this is anything extracellular. So anything not cells will be made of protein fibers, ground substance, and fluid. So in your connective tissue components, you'll have cells and you'll have extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix will consist of ground substance, which is like gel, non-fibrous component, will have protein in it, other molecules. The structure of the matrix is responsible for the functional characteristics of the connective tissue. So for example, the extracellular matrix in bone and cartilage will help bear weight. Matrix protein fibers, the different protein fibers in the extracellular matrix can be collagen fibers, which will be very flexible but resist stretching. They'll be like ropes. Reticular fibers are a lot thinner and help to support things, especially in your organs. And then elastic fibers have the ability to retain or return to its original shape. The ground substance consists of non-fibrous molecules. It's shapeless. Think of your ground substance kind of like jelly or jam. It consists of proteoglycans, which are large molecules of protein attached to many sugars. Those are polysaccharides. And these guys, proteoglycans, can trap large amounts of water, which allow them to return to the original shape when compressed. So the ground substance, again, is kind of like jelly. It has a lot of water in it, some proteins. The two main types of connective tissue are embryonic and adult connective tissue. Embryonic are kind of in the first 8 weeks of development of the embryo. And by 8 weeks, most of the embryonic connective tissue will become specialized or turn into the different types of connective tissue that you need for an adult. Loose connective tissue consists of relatively few protein fibers that form a lacy network. There's 3 subdivisions of loose connective tissue. If you remember from lab, there's areolar, adipose, and reticular. Areolar loose connective tissue primarily consists of collagen fibers and a few elastic fibers. And I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. Hopefully we'll get to some pictures. There we go. Adipose tissue is your fat tissue, and it contains fat cells or adipocytes. The suffix "cyte" is cell, so adipocyte is a fat cell. Fat cells contain large amounts of lipid for energy storage. Reticular tissue forms the framework of lymphatic tissue, such as your spleen and lymph nodes, as well as in the bone marrow and your liver. So here's a look at loose areolar connective tissue. Again, for your lab exam, you might have to identify a picture of loose areolar connective tissue. Loose areolar connective tissue has a lot of fibers in it, some cells, and that's about it. You'll see a lot of empty spaces, and that's where the ground substance is. Adipose tissue is real easy to spot because it looks like big empty cells. These are all adipocytes or fat cells, and they're filled primarily with fat. So they're filled to the gills with fat so much that they push their nucleus off to the edges that's surrounding it. So these are adipocytes making up adipose tissue, located really throughout the body to help with packing material, keep your body warm, and energy storage. The dense connective tissue in contrast to loose, has a relatively large number of protein fibers that form thick bundles. And we can have collagenous and elastic dense connective tissue. Dense collagenous connective tissue is made up mostly of collagen fibers. So dense collagenous tissue can be dense regular if all of the collagen fibers are going in one direction and are packed nicely on top of each other. And this, because of how it's situated or formed, this makes it really good material for tendons and ligaments, because tendons and ligaments connect bone to bone and muscle to bone. So dense regular connective tissue have to be very strong to connect your bones together or your muscles to your bones. Then dense irregular connective tissue will have lots of collagen fibers, but they'll be going in any different direction. So an example of dense irregular connective tissue are in the dermis of your skin. Again, the dermis layer of the skin is right below the epidermis, and it also will be found in organ capsules. So this dense irregular connective tissue is what allows, if you pull up some skin, it allows your skin to snap back. The collagen fibers in your face become less elastic with time, and that's what gives you wrinkles. But dense irregular is found in the dermis layer of your skin. So here is dense regular. You can see the collagen fibers, they look kind of like layers of spaghetti. They're really nicely stacked on top of each other, very parallel, so they're very strong. So they'll form the ligaments, the tendons. We don't have a picture. This is still dense, regular, elastic. Okay. Dense elastic connective tissue has abundant elastic fibers. So dense elastic tissue, and examples of where it's located is found in the tissue of your vocal cords. So there's a genetic condition called Marfan syndrome, and it results in the inability to properly maintain and form elastic fibers. So here's dense elastic connective tissue found in your vocal cords. Where else? Located in between the ligaments between the vertebra, also along the dorsal apse of your neck. It's also located in your blood vessel wall, specifically in like your aorta, which leaves your heart and takes your blood out of your heart. This elastic tissue gives the aorta the ability to stretch from all the blood that's leaving the heart. Cartilage then, so another type of connective tissue. It's composed of chondrocytes. It's located in spaces called lacunae. It has an extensive matrix. Collagen is in the matrix, which gives cartilage its flexibility and strength. Cartilage is resilient because those proteoglycans will trap water. Cartilage will help provide support, and it can bend and be slightly compressed and return to its original shape. There's three types of cartilage: hyaline, fibrocartilage, and elastic. Hyaline cartilage is important to know because it's the most abundant type of cartilage. Hyaline cartilage covers the ends of your bones. So when people need knee replacements, it's when the cartilage surrounding the connection of bones in the knees has been completely worn down. So it can be really painful. So hyaline cartilage forms the end of your bones. Fibrocartilage has more collagen, and it's able to withstand compression and resist tearing or pulling. So you'll find fibrocartilage in your intervertebral discs. Where are your intervertebral discs?
In your back?
In your back. So they're between your vertebra bones in your back. So here's hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage looks really glossy in appearance, kind of shiny. There aren't many fibers in the matrix of hyaline cartilage. And again, it will be found along the ends of your bone. And this is a look at your knee bone. There's your patella, your femur, and here's your tibia and fibula. So the hyaline cartilage helps to protect your bones so they're not rubbing bone on bone. There's a little space there, and hyaline cartilage helps to protect that. My dad's knees are shot. He has no cartilage left. He needs to get knee replacements, but he doesn't want to. He's stubborn. He needs to. I'm sure you guys have experience with people with knee replacements or other things like that. So fibrillar cartilage is found in the discs between your vertebrae and also in some joints such as the knee. Fibrocartilage pads are found also between the femur and the tibia to help to provide some protection against compression. also found in your jaw, your temporomandibular joint. So that's fibrocartilage. Elastic cartilage is then contains elastic fibers. So you'll find elastic cartilage in your external ear, because your ears can bend and regain its shape. Your epiglottis, which is a little flap of tissue that closes off your trachea when you swallow food. So food doesn't go down your windpipe, it goes down your esophagus. And also your auditory tube contains some elastic cartilage. So here's fibrocartilage. Again, you can see a lot of those fibers in the matrix, and that makes up your intervertebral discs between vertebrae. If an intervertebral disc bulges out or sticks out, we call that a herniated disc, and that can be really painful if it pinches up against a spinal nerve. So that's what a herniated disc is. It's a bulging out of this intervertebral disc, and this is what elastic cartilage looks like. Okay, bone is a hard connective tissue. It consists of living cells, mineralized matrix. Osteocytes also hang out in lacuna, which are just spaces for them. It's really strong. There's two types of bone, spongy bone and compact bone. Spongy bone has spaces between it. It looks like a sponge. We call kind of what makes up spongy bone this trabeculae type structure. And again, it forms a sponge. Compact bone is much more solid with almost no space between the layers of the mineralized matrix. And this is what bone looks like underneath a microscope. It resembles kind of the rings like around a tree trunk. If you were to take a transverse section off of a tree, these rings are called lamella, and they surround the central canal. And the central canal is what all the blood vessels and nerves travel up and down bone. So this is what bone is. The little dark circles are the osteocytes, and those are bone cells hanging out in those spaces called lacuna. Blood then is the liquid connective tissue. So it will contain liquid matrix, which is the plasma, along with formed elements. So in blood, it has plasma and formed elements. The plasma is the liquid matrix, and the formed elements are all the cells. The erythrocytes, your red blood cells, your leukocytes are white blood cells, and platelets. Blood helps to transport food, glucose, oxygen, waste hormones, other substances, carbon dioxide. So this is what blood looks like. So if you were to take a finger prick of yourself and put it underneath a microscope, you'd see a lot of red blood cells, which are these guys. They don't have nuclei. They don't have a nucleus in your red blood cells. And that's because they want to carry as much oxygen as possible. So there's no space for a nucleus. They're just made up of a protein called hemoglobin. Then all your white blood cells look a little bit more purplish in color from the stain from the microscope slide, and they'll usually have nuclei or granules in them. And the smallest little dots are the platelets, and platelets help with blood clotting. So if you get cut, the platelets will go to that area of cut to help stop blood from bleeding out of your body. Muscle. So then muscle tissue, the main function of muscle tissue is to shorten. When muscle tissue shortens, that is called contraction, and that moves your body parts. So when your biceps muscles shorten, that allows your forearm to do a bicep curl. Muscle contraction results from contractile proteins located within the muscle cells. And we'll go over three types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscle is attached to your skeleton bones, and that enables your body to move. Skeletal muscle cells will be striated. Think of striation, looks like zebra stripes. They'll be banded. That means different, they're banded because different arrangement of protein will be kind of layered on top of each other. So this is what skeletal muscle looks like. We say it's striated because it has these nice striations to it that kind of think zebra stripes. So that's skeletal muscle tissue found and attached to bone or other connective tissue. Cardiac muscle is located in the heart. It's responsible for pumping blood. Cardiac muscles are more cylindrical, but they're much shorter. They're also striated. They have one nucleus per cell. They're often branched, and they're connected to one another by what we call intercalated discs. And this is what cardiac muscle tissue looks like. It looks like Y branches or branches off a tree. It has these darker lines called intercalated discs. So you see striations in cardiac muscle tissue, but you also see these darker lines called intercalated discs. Those are special junctions between cells to allow the heart to contract as a unit, which is very important that it contracts all together at the same time so everything moves the way it should go. Quick question for you. Is skeletal muscle voluntary or involuntary? Do you guys control that?
Voluntary.
Voluntary.
Good. What about cardiac muscle?
Involuntary.
Voluntary,
Good.
it does it without knowing.
Why is that good?
Because you need your heart to beat even if you're unconscious.
When you're asleep?
It
Exactly.
regulates homeostasis as well.
Yes. So the body has the ability to control how fast your heart beats without you telling it to. It just knows what to do. Also, one thing about the heart, if you take a heart out of the body, it's able to continue beating on its own. So the heart can establish its own heartbeats. Smooth muscle then is found in the walls of hollow organs, such as your intestines, your digestive tract. The uterus is under smooth muscle. So is smooth muscle voluntary or involuntary? What do you think?
Involuntary.
Involuntary. You're not telling your digestive tract when to move food along, or you're not telling your stomach when to move the food from your stomach to your small intestine. So this is involuntary control. There are not striations in smooth muscle. So you'll see it's a lot smoother. There aren't little zebra stripes throughout it. So if the uterus is made of smooth muscle, what are contractions? Why do they tell women to push if the contractions are happening without their control? You hear of women in comas giving birth. Why do they still tell women to push? Anyone giving birth in here besides me?
Well, the push is to help the process. It's
Yes.
not that, it's necessary.
That's a great way to say it. So it's not completely necessary, but pushing down does help. Looks like a Twizzler. Thanks, Brian. Yes, it does look like Twizzler, the smooth muscle. So yeah, they still tell women to push or bear down because it does still help the process of it. But there are women who give birth in comas because smooth muscle is involuntary. It happens on its own. It moves things on its own. Yes.
Now, is that because you're moving the abdomen muscles around that smooth muscle, so that way it's just basically like pulling it all together to help assist everything?
Yes, so basically what you're doing, the diaphragm is a big player in this. Your diaphragm builds up muscle in the abdominal cavity, and that buildup of pressure, the buildup of pressure helps to push the baby out. But the actual uterus doing the contractions, that part is going on its own. So when women get epidurals, they don't feel their uterus contracting anymore, which is a wonderful thing in medicine because you don't have to feel the contractions. But so the contractions will happen, but bearing down builds up pressure in the abdominal cavity, which will help push the baby out.
Hey, Professor, the crazy thing is, like, how does it tear? Like, your body's supposed to protect itself, but in the process of birth, you can actually tear muscles on the push. How is that even possible?
Yeah, so we're getting into a lot of details here. So yeah, tearing usually occurs on the exterior of the woman's body because just if the head comes out and especially if the baby comes out super fast, the woman's body hasn't had a chance to like completely stretch out. So she could actually tear on the exterior part of the body, especially if it's like her first kid and the baby comes out fast, her body isn't used to stretching. Because I mean, when they say 10 centimeters of dilation, that's like this big, as big as a melon. So if she hasn't had a chance usually that's why labor takes so long to give the woman's body a chance to stretch. But if it goes a lot faster, she might actually tear.
Yeah, it just like, it's crazy when you look at it as an engine. Like the human body itself is like, functionality wise, it can't keep up.
Yeah, the human body is amazing. Yeah, and not just women's body, men's body too, but the fact that a woman can go from being like huge and then basically back to normal is just crazy. Great questions, guys. Yeah, and it usually depends how big the head and the shoulders are. Yeah, Melinda, with tearing. Great questions. Okay, then nervous tissue. This is the last type of tissue we have. Nervous tissue will form the brain, spinal cord, nerves. It's responsible for coordinating and controlling many body activities. Nervous tissue consists of neurons and support cells called glial cells. So the nerve cell is responsible for the conducting action of the potentials. So that means the neurons will connect the stimuli through. And it's composed of 3 parts: a cell body, dendrites, and axons. And this is a look at a neuron. On the right is showing nervous tissue. So this will be where tissue makes up your brain, your spinal cord, your spinal nerves. Most of what's in nervous tissue are these beautiful neurons. So you see the cell body is the center part that has the nucleus. The axon is kind of the elongated part that sends the signal down, and the dendrites are kind of these finger-like projections that pick up the signal from other neurons. So think of a neuron kind of like your hand and your arm. I know this is harder to see. So these would be like your dendrites that receive a signal from other neurons. The cell body is like the palm of your hand, and then your arm is the axon that carries the signal down to other neurons. Everything else you see in nervous tissue is just a glial cell, and glial cells just help to support the neurons. Tissue membranes, let's see, how are we doing here? I just want to see. Tissue membrane is a thin sheet or layer of tissue that covers the structure or lines a cavity. Most membranes consist of epithelium and connective tissue. There are 4 tissue membranes in the body. They're cutaneous, they're mucous, they're serous, and they're synovial. The skin is termed the cutaneous membrane, and that's the external body surface. The mucous membranes line cavities that open to the outside of the body, like your digestive, respiratory, and reproductive tracts. So that's what a mucous membrane is. Most of them, but not all, will actually secrete mucus. And the function of your mucous membranes are protection, absorption, and secretion. Serous membranes line body cavities that do not open to the exterior of the body. So an example of these are membranes in your heart cavity, the pericardial cavity, the pleural cavity, the cavity that your lungs are in, and the peritoneal cavity, the cavities that your abdominal organs are in. These are the components of the serous membrane: a squamous epithelium layer, a loose connective tissue layer, the basement membrane. They do not contain glands, but they will secrete what we call serous fluid. That'll help lubricate the surface of the membrane, just so the organs they're fluidly moving throughout the body within their cavity. Then synovial membranes line the cavities of joints. Synovial membranes produce synovial fluid, which makes the joint very slippery and thereby reduces friction, which is good because you want your joints to move, especially in your knee. So these are examples of the different internal membranes. Mucous membranes, again, have connection with the exterior of the body, so respiratory, digestive. Serous membranes do not have connection with the external body, so you'll find them surrounding the lungs, the heart, the abdominal organs, the abdominal cavity. And then synovial membranes secrete synovial fluid, and you'll find synovial membranes around joints. And they're important for secreting fluid to help produce friction in your knees or your elbows or your wrists or your ankles. So those are what we talk about when we say these internal membranes. Tissue inflammation. Inflammation is usually a beneficial process that occurs when tissues are damaged. And that's because inflammation will kind of attract things to the site of damage to help fix it. So when a virus infects epithelial cells of your upper respiratory tract, like a cold, inflammation and the symptoms of the common cold will be produced. And those symptoms are produced to help get rid of that virus. So the inflammatory process will occur in stages. Inflammation mobilizes the body's defenses and isolates and destroys anything foreign to it so that the damaged cells can be taken away and the repairs can be done. So here are the 5 major symptoms of inflammation: redness, heat, like a fever, swelling, pain, and any sort of disturbance of function. So those are the 5 major symptoms of inflammation. But again, inflammation is a good thing, trying to get rid of a virus or anything foreign that has invaded this tissue. So here's inflammation. Let's say you get a splinter. Bacteria will be introduced that were on the splinter itself, and then chemical mediators of inflammation will be released or activated to attract different things to the area of damage. So you'll see here, blood cells will leave, they'll move to the site of the bacterial infection, they'll begin to phagocytize, which like engulf or digest the bacteria and other debris. Tissue repair involves substitution of dead cells. It can occur by regeneration or fibrosis. In regeneration, the new cells are restored. So if regeneration, things will be restored, new cells will be created, and normal function will be restored. Fibrosis is replacement, where a new type of tissue develops that eventually causes a scar production. Regeneration can completely repair some tissue, such as the skin or mucous membrane of the intestine. And regeneration will then be accomplished by what we call stem cells, which are self-renewing, undifferentiated cells that can continue to divide throughout life. And tissue repair also occurs in sequential steps. I don't think there's a whole lot of questions on your lecture exam about tissue repair, but it's good to understand if there is some sort of cut from, let's say you cut yourself when you're slicing a tomato, a blood clot will form, a scab will form, and you can read through the different types of cells that will come to the aid to try to replace the tissue that was damaged. Tissue repair happens a lot faster in little kids or babies. That's why I often say kids are like magicians, because they get cut on their face in like a day, they look healed, versus like my 70-year-old dad, he'll get cut and he'll have that there, you know, for weeks before it can get healed. Okay, so I'll stop it here.